Neil, good to be with you.
How do you think you did tonight?
Look, I thought it was great. I thought it was a terrific debate. I will say kudos to Fox Business and to the Wall Street Journal. I thought you all did it. As you know, midway through the debate, I told all three of you I thought you were doing a terrific job.
Thank you very much.
And it's because the content was substantive. The questions weren't softballs. You pressed the candidates. But it was based on substance and policy and record. It wasn't condescending and nasty and personal. And I think the result of that is we saw some very clear differentiation among the candidates. I think this debate will prove very helpful for Republican primary voters in understanding the differences between where Republican candidates are.
Contrary to a lot of early reports when this race started, Senator, no one gave you much of a chance. You're not the top guy, but you're in the top tier now. You're having no problem raising money. You have a lot of cash on hand. You don't blow it away. We were talking like the problem with Scott Walker's. He had a lot of cash coming in, but had a very expensive fat budget. Not you. You're lean, mean, all of that. But how do you close the deal? I mean, you've got to wait for others to fail, right? I mean, or they can't keep going on.
Well, there's a natural winnowing process that is happening. And
are you surprised more aren't winnowing out?
No, I think that is happening. You're seeing a clear break in the field. And, historically, there have been two lanes in the Republican primary. There's been a moderate establishment lane and a conservative lane. Typically in the past, there's one moderate candidate. All the money gets behind him. And on the conservative side, there are a bunch of conservatives. No one has any money. We fight like cats and dogs. And that's how the moderate tends to win the nomination and then goes on to lose the general election. What I'm encouraged by is this election cycle, Neil, that's flipped. The moderate lane is crowded as all get out. There are a whole bunch of candidates who I think are going to spend millions of dollars ripping each other apart to see who's going to be the moderate candidate.
Well, a couple of them were gunning for you.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that's a testament to your surge of the polls, the money you're raising, but you and Rand Paul.
Yeah. Well, and you look at the flip side, the conservative lane, the two candidates who've dropped out, Rick Perry, Scott Walker, both very good men, strong governors. Both were competing predominantly in the conservative lane, and what we're seeing is conservatives uniting behind our campaign.
You're considered also a bridge between the establishment. You are a United States Senator, after all, but you're a Maverick Senator, so that brings you the outside, the typical political petri dish. So do you align yourself closer to the Donald Trumps or the Marco Rubios?
Well, let me put it this way. I am in elected office, although I'll point out I've been in the Senate 3 years. 3 years ago, the last thing I'd been elected to was student council. And I don't think anyone...
Well, I mean, you're not a slouch. You were Solicitor General, argued many of the most important legal cases of our time, so don't sell that short.
But that's the other point, which is that if you look at, unlike some of the candidates in this race, I've got a record. Everyone on that stage says they're going to take on Washington. They're going to stand up to the cronyism. Well, the natural next question, if you say you're going to take on Washington, is, okay, who actually has taken on Washington? Not just Democrats, but leaders in our own party. And in that regard...
But has that alienated you on both sides?
Look,
to the point that it's one thing to take... But you've taken everybody on. You've burned a lot of bridges.
I've burned bridges among career politicians in Washington, and if you're looking for someone to go along to get along, I ain't your guy.
But if you became President of the United States, Senator, you'd have to work with the same people you've constantly ripped a new one.
But let me give a precedent for that. One of the things I talk about a lot is, this summer I wrote a book called A Time for Truth. And then the book talks about the Washington Cartel, the career politicians in both parties that get in bed with lobbyists and special interests and grow government. If you look at the last time we broke the Washington Cartel, it was 1980. Ronald Reagan, and it was a grassroots campaign from the people. And it's worth remembering, Washington despised Ronald Reagan. Remember, in '76, Reagan had primaried Gerald Ford. You want to make Republican leadership in Washington loathe you? Come within an inch of beating the incumbent Republican president in a primary. And Reagan led a grassroots revolution that swept in and turned this country around.
But you raised a good point, Senator. 76 wasn't his year. 80 was. So let me flip forward and say 2016 might not be your year. 2020 might.
2016 has to be. The stakes are too high. We are bankrupting our country. It's now or never. And I do think the parallels are really uncanny. I think the similarities between Barack Obama and Jimmy Carter are striking.
Well, you know, they made the age similarity with you and Barack Obama, roughly the same age. Not a lot of Senate experience when going for the big job.
Well, and you think about, how did Obama get elected? He turned out his base. Every time we nominate a candidate who runs to the mushy middle, we lose. And what's abundantly clear, if we do it again, if we nominate another candidate in the mold of a Bob Dole or a John McCain or a Mitt Romney, all of whom are good, honorable, decent men.
So you're that Rush Limbaugh. We've never built monuments to moderates, right?
Well, let me put it this way. If you define as a Reaganite anyone who was with Ronald Reagan in the primary in 1980, do you know Republicans have never once nominated a Reaganite for president after 1984? Every Republican nominee from 84 on opposed Reagan in 1980. I'm 44 years old. I have never once been able to go and vote for a Reaganite for president. And if you look at why we're losing, if you look at the numbers, I'm a numbers and data guy. You know, you mentioned I was a Supreme Court litigator. I'm interested in winning. If you look at the numbers, the most striking difference between 04, the last race we won in 08 and 12, is the millions of conservatives who stayed home in 08 and 12. And if we want to win, we got to bring them back. And that's why I'm so encouraged.
You might be able to do that, but here's where you could get caught up. Your comments tonight about rescuing a bank that was on the brink made very good legal sense. I mean, if too big to fail, obviously, a lot of people don't believe it, and that if we're on the brink, we're going to do it again. But you seem to be throwing into the mix, and John, raised to the debate with you, that innocent depositors who, through no fault of their own, got caught up in the malfeasance of these crooks who ran the place or played it wrong, that their deposits are gone.
But of course you can't, but that's a nonsense point. We have the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, that guarantees deposits. The federal government already guarantees your deposits. We've done that for decades.
But there are limits on those deposits.
There are limits, so we don't necessarily need to guarantee billionaires.
Okay.
And look, people are fed up with the cronyism.
But you know how that would be played on the stump if you were running for president. Ted Cruz would let you dry on the vine.
I'll tell you what, Neil. I'm happy to give Hillary Clinton every voter in America that thinks we should bail out Wall Street and the giant banks. And I'll take every voter who thinks we need to stop bailing out Wall Street and the giant banks and we need to stand with Main Street and working men and women. And if that's the divide, we'll win another election. It won't be like 2004. It'll be like 1984, where Reagan won 49 states. I guarantee you, the people of America are tired of politicians deciding who's a winner and who's a loser and favoring giant corporations at the expense of the little guy. I fight for the entrepreneur. I fight for the working men and women. In 1957, washing dishes, making 50 cents an hour. That's free enterprise, not the cronyism and corruption that characterizes Washington right now.
Where are you off to tomorrow?
Headed to New Hampshire. And then I spent a lot of time in...
What are your best hopes? New Hampshire?
You know,
Iowa, a little less so Iowa?
I'd say the other way around, but we've got a phenomenal base. You know, it's interesting. There are candidates in this field who have to win Iowa. It's do or die.
Right.
There are other candidates that have to win New Hampshire. I think we've got tremendous flexibility where we are all in Iowa. We've got an amazing team there. We are all in New Hampshire. We are all in South Carolina. We're all in Nevada. But 10 days after South Carolina is Super Tuesday. It's a so-called SEC primary. It's Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Texas. Those are all conservative southern states. Our team there is phenomenal. It's the single day with the most delegates awarded.
Do you think someone's going to get to Cleveland, though, because it's still crowded, because we have so many apportioned delegate states, that we could get to Cleveland without a nominee, without someone who has those delegates necessary to get the nominee?
It's possible, but I actually don't think so.
Really?
You know, we were talking about the two lanes. I think there will be a winner of the moderate lane. It may take till January or February, even March, but
you're going to win the
win.
conservative lane.
I believe I'm going to win the conservative lane. And then when it gets head-to-head, a moderate versus a conservative, we win. In the Republican primary, conservatives outnumber moderates 3-1. And here's a game changer, and you referenced it earlier. You know, if you think back to 2012, Republican primary voters desperately wanted a more conservative alternative to Mitt Romney. There were, 6, 7, 8 front runners? but none of them could raise real money. So one after the other would pop to the top.
Yeah, money's crucial.
Hit with $10 million in attack ads, and they'd be roadkill.
What if all that big money goes to Marco Rubio?
Look, that could happen. I think Jeb views Marco as the most formidable player in the moderate lane, and they're slugging it out.
So they could cancel themselves out.
But what is amazing and a game changer this cycle, our fundraising, we've raised over $26 million. We reported the last fundraising quarter the most money in the bank of any Republican in the field. And that's because, to date, over 450,000 contributions have gone to tedcruz.org, tedcruz.org. There has not been a true grassroots movement conservative with serious fundraising ability and the resources to communicate since 1980. Ronald Reagan was the last time that happened.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Senator Cruz, very good seeing you.
Thank you, Neil.
All right, be well. Safe travels. Well, he's the guy that, Jack Welch likes, and he's a pretty good judge of character. So that alone should make you think that this guy they were dismissing a little more than a few months ago, well, guess who's still standing, and guess who is still raising money?